joined the Florida Realtors in 2015 as a senior public policy representative with over 15 years of experience in government affairs. As the Vice President of Public Policy, Danielle manages the Government Affairs team and the Realtor Political Action Committee. Danielle also serves as the staff liaison to Florida Realtors Public Policy, State and Local Taxation, and Attainable Workforce Housing Committees. Danielle also serves as a member of the State and Local Issues Policy Committee and the GAD Advisory Committee with the National Association of Realtors. Previously, Danielle was the Director of Legislative and Cabinet Services for the Florida Department of Revenue. In this capacity, she was responsible for advocating for the department's legislative priorities and working with members of the Florida Cabinet. Before joining the Florida Department of Revenue, Danielle served in multiple leadership roles within the state government as Deputy Legislative Affairs Director for the Executive Office of the Governor and Policy Chief in the Office of Policy and Budget. Danielle also gained valuable experience as the Deputy Director of Legislative Affairs at the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, Voting Systems Certification Manager at the Department of State, and Information Technology Analyst at the Department of Revenue. Danielle has also served as a youth volunteer with the Leon County School System and election certification instructor with the Florida Institute of Government. Danielle received her formal education at Florida State University, where she earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in Management Information Systems, MIS, and a master's degree in Applied American Politics and Policy, MAAPP. A native Floridian, Danielle and her family reside in Tallahassee, Florida. Welcome. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much, Dan. Wow, when I hear my bio read, it makes me sound a lot older than I am, but I've had the ability and just the distinct honor to serve in a lot of different roles in state government. So thank you for inviting me here today. As Dan mentioned, my name is Danielle Scoggins. I am the Vice President of Public Policy for Florida Association of Realtors, and we are located here in Tallahassee, but our headquarters, as most of you know, are there in Orlando. So thank you again for the ability to speak this morning. I'm going to go through a few prepared remarks relating to, we're going to start with the federal eviction moratorium, talk about a few pieces of federal legislation, and then I'll pivot to state legislative session and some issues to expect in the next couple of months. And then of course, if anybody has questions, please let me know. So first we'll start with the federal eviction moratorium. I'm going to share my screen briefly, and bear with me one moment.
Just to recap, so the federal moratorium is different from the state moratorium that Governor DeSantis just allowed to lapse as of at the end of last month.
That is correct. Can everybody see me okay?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll start back in April. In April, Governor DeSantis issued a state eviction moratorium, and then he extended it every 30 days after it was going to expire. The original eviction moratorium was issued for 45 days, and then the day before it was going to expire, the governor continued to extend it. We, as the Florida Association of Realtors, worked with the governor's office and really to educate him on what that would mean for our property managers and for the rental market as a whole. As you know, landlord-tenant issues are something very important to Florida Realtors, and then also households and home ownership around the state tie hand in hand to that, if you're looking at the rental market and the investment market. So we've been working with the governor's office on that, and we were able to convince him to let the current state eviction moratorium expire at the end of September. So there is no longer a state moratorium on evictions. But overlapping that, on September 4th, CDC issued an executive order basically saying there will be no evictions. There's a moratorium through the end of the year. There is some caveats to that, and I've pulled up this summary document here just to kind of show some of the bullet points for you. The federal moratorium differed from the state moratorium in that the CDC's order requires residents to declare that they have gone through specific steps to first try to receive some aid. before they say, listen, I cannot, under penalty of perjury, I cannot pay my rent. When is eviction allowed? What's going to happen is those rent payments are still due, as we've already discussed. This moratorium doesn't waive your requirement to pay your rent or your lease payments. What it does is say you cannot be evicted for being unable to pay right now. So what's going to happen, and we've been working with our federal partners and discussing with the CDC and the White House, what's going to happen when this moratorium expires, say December 31st, is there could be a wave of evictions filed that could, again, flood the court system and then cause a lot of other issues as it relates to the state and the housing market, which is what our focus is. In preparation for today's meeting, I pulled a few statistics from our national association. And again, these are federal numbers. So that means this involves all 50 states. But 40% of landlords are small landlords. They own less than 5 properties. So you're not talking about a big LLC that owns a lot of investment properties. That's 40% around the nation. In addition to that, 25% of our Realtor members own rental property. So that's 1/4 of our membership own rental properties, and this could potentially impact them. So what else are we doing at the federal level? Our federal lobbyists are working, again, as I started out with members of Congress and asking them, particularly the Senate, to work with the House on some type of home housing assistance that goes specifically to landlords or housing providers. We like to use the term housing provider because, a landlord isn't necessarily the property manager or the homeowner. And so those are some of the things that we're working on at the federal level. But in a nutshell, to summarize this topic, the state eviction moratorium has expired as of midnight of September 30th, but the federal eviction moratorium still stays in place through December 31st. Dan, I'm going to pause there for any questions on this topic. And I'll scroll down a little bit.
Maybe you can clarify my understanding of the CDC moratorium is that this is only for the non-payment of rent, correct? So this wouldn't include other types of non-compliance issues that you would still be able to evict for.
That's absolutely correct. It's only for the non-payment of rent. This doesn't have anything to do with violations of other sections of the lease, like property damage, et cetera.
Okay. And then, so in order to qualify, a tenant would have to file what's called a declaration, attesting to certain things like they made best efforts to pay rent. They have to make under a certain amount of money. Basically, that. What are some of the? I made some notes here. That there's a chance that if they are evicted, they will become homeless or put into a situation where they're going to have to live with groups of other people in some type of a setting. Does that sound right to you?
That is correct. And if you look at the first bullet point, and again, this is kind of broad, right? But have used best efforts to obtain all available government assistance for rent and housing. As we know, there are a lot of different programs out there, including state programs through the Florida Housing Finance Corporation that individuals can take advantage of. And so this attestation is that they've gone through best efforts to obtain government assistance. There are the income thresholds there, unable to pay the full rent or housing due to sustainable loss of housing income. Again, use best efforts to make even timely partial payments. And then the eviction would likely render them homeless.
Okay. And any idea who provides this declaration?
The CDC has a declaration, but they, of course, want to look to the states to help them enforce, which is part of the subjective nature of the order. We, in the state of Florida, have the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, that is the entity where housing funds flow through, both federal housing funds coming down and then housing funds from the state, like the SHIP program and the SAIL program. And so it would be up to the specific entities to help manage. They manage the CARES Act dollars and others. So as far as enforcement goes, when you go down here, the federal authorities and the Department of Justice will take action if necessary. But again, this is a new order, right? It was just issued September 4th. So I'm not aware of any actions that have had to take place. So there isn't any experience at the state level on this issue right now. It'll be something interesting to see over the next couple of months.
So that's a big question, like, right? So what's the recourse if somebody fills out one of these declarations and just, well, they lie? They make up the information.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like I'm dominating the questions. Or anybody else have a question for Danielle in regards to this so far?
Yeah, Danielle, and I don't know if you can answer this. We referred the homeowner to an attorney, but apparently they were renting to multiple people and within one unit. And for health concerns, I guess one resident was concerned about the other bringing back COVID, and they wanted to evict that person because they weren't following CDC guidelines. And and I'm like, well, we're the city. We can't answer that for you, but here's what the and we sent them something like this. So have you heard anything like that?
We haven't heard anything like that. Now, I would say we have a legal hotline for our members where folks call and ask any number of questions, right? And so our legal hotline hasn't received any questions like that I'm aware of. Now, I will state that probably what we would do is refer that individual back to the lease if there's some type of a health and safety clause of the lease. Again, the leases are typically written on an annual or biannual basis. And if the lease was written in January, there's no way to be able to anticipate a global pandemic. But I would have done, Sherry, the exact same thing that you did. I would have referred that member, if they called me, to our legal hotline for assistance.
Anybody else have any questions for Danielle on this at this point? Danielle, are you seeing any hint that this might go beyond December 31st? That this might be extended?
Yeah, really good question. So as I mentioned at the beginning, our National Association of Realtors has been working with the White House and the CDC on this item. Let me pull up. This is an example of, I'll just pivot to, this is an example of a letter that we as a coalition sent regarding this topic, not only opposing the federal eviction moratorium, but then also asking for housing provider assistance. So this group here, we sent to Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, Leader Schumer, and Leader McCarthy asking for, and again, the letter's 2 pages, but essentially the takeaway is, based from the lending industry's perspective, from the commercial real estate, residential real estate, National Association perspective, we're asking for relief from Congress. But in addition, we're asking for the moratorium to expire on December 31st. We're having positive conversations at the federal level on this. As I mentioned, we initiated a call for action, but very targeted call for action, just to those United States senators that sit on key committees. So we have our federal political coordinators calling specifically those individuals and asking, Senator Lopez, we need housing provider assistance, and we also need this moratorium to expire. If not, there's already going to be a ripple effect through the housing market, but it's going to be worse each month that it's extended, right? And some of the points that we've been making, Dan, and when I talk to our state senators and state representatives, I say, listen, even if you don't have a mortgage on the investment property or the rental property, even if you're not having that monthly payment, taxes are still due. You still need to pay your property taxes and your insurance payments. And so without having that rental income to offset that, to pay for that, each month that goes by, I mean, as a housing provider, you can't sustain that for very long. It's already been 7 months. If this goes longer than, again, the end of December, we're really going ahead and saying, listen, this is going to cause a problem in the housing market. And as goes the housing market, can go the economy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fair to say it will only continue to escalate further and further as money isn't coming in. As you mentioned, 40% of landlords are considered small landlords. If the income isn't coming in, their responsibility hasn't changed in any way, shape, or form for maintenance on the property. If the heating and AC goes out, they're responsible for fixing it, correcting it. If there's a roof leak, they're responsible for fixing it, correcting it. From small items to major system items, and without the money coming in, and they're having to exhaust their own funds to make those corrections, it just continues to get worse and worse, and then that creates additional legal complications because now the landlord is failing on their duties and responsibilities.
Well, and as everybody here on this call knows, property taxes go to help go towards funding local government, state government, a lot of other programs. And so again, as property taxes lag, if individuals with non-homestead properties particularly, their tax liability is higher than a homestead property. So if you have a lot of non-homestead properties that are going into foreclosure or their taxes aren't being paid, that has a ripple effect again through all the other areas of government and the economy.
All right. All right. Anybody else have any questions for Danielle? All right. What else you got for us, Danielle?
So I'll mention briefly something that happened last week, that the president signed into law a bill that would extend the National Flood Insurance Program by 1 year. Previous to this, we've been getting 60-day extensions, 30-day extensions, short-term extensions. And so having a National Flood Insurance Program is very important to our Florida market, of course. And so that was signed into law. So we have a year extension, and that's good news for us nationally, but then also for the state. So that's NFIP. Pivoting to a few things to look out for, especially in the business community upcoming for session. We, working with your Florida Chamber of Commerce, the Associated Industries of Florida, et cetera, and Chief Financial Officer Jimmy Petronis are working on COVID liability business protections. That will be a piece of legislation that we'll be working through this next session. Relating to protecting businesses from unwarranted lawsuits, essentially. There's a huge concern from the business community, every place from Walgreens to your local realtor to your local business owners and your small business owners and your coffee shops, about individuals coming back and filing suit and claiming that they were infected with a coronavirus because they went to an open house or because they shopped at Walgreens or et cetera, et cetera. This applies across the board. So as a business community, we've been working on discussions with the Chief Financial Officer, and he issued guiding principles on a piece of legislation. I'll pivot there. That he wants to help work with the business community on during session. So there are 3 general guiding principles there. Again, starting with businesses must do right by employees and customers, meaning, there are basic health and safety guidelines, social distancing, employees wearing masks, et cetera, that are there for the protection of not only the employees, but the patrons of the establishment, or in our case, maybe an open house or a client coming in to meet with a broker. Principle number 2, protections must be consistent and simple. Again, this is something when you're looking at state legislation and drafting law, you want it to be clear and concise about what you can and cannot do. And so that's principle number 2. And then number 3 is more of an overall guiding principle, which is justice should come first, not attorney profits. We have been working on, we as the collective, we business community have been working on tort reform issues for quite a while. We see everything from, assignment of benefit abuse and other ways. If attorney's fees aren't capped, then these cases can come down. Exorbitant costs for those of you who have, business insurance, what your monthly premiums are. If you see your monthly premiums going up, it's because the risk is being spread over the book of business with increased costs of litigation. So I say all that to say that was a lot to say that there's a very big piece of legislation that will be filed during session, and we'll be working through the process, and that all of us in the business community are going to be having input on, and that is liability protections. And so again, this is being led by Chief Financial Officer Jimmy Petronis, and we haven't even gotten through the elections yet, right? So we have election day, as a reminder, is November 3rd. 2 weeks after that, we go into organizational session. And what does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. The legislature gets organized. The new Speaker of the House and Senate President are sworn in. They set their committees, their committee chairman, their majority leaders. The minority party does the same. And so the legislature gets set. They get organized to go into committee weeks and go into session. So that is 2 weeks after Election Day. We have organizational session on November 17th. and then we start committee weeks. So very quickly, we will be working on bills and the state budget, et cetera. But this is one big issue you will probably read a lot about. And we, as Florida Realtors, will be involved in that, along with, as I mentioned, the Florida Chamber, the Restaurant Lodging Association, the Retail Federation, et cetera.
Very good. Well, obviously, this is something that should spark the interest for the chambers across the state of Florida, for sure. Anybody have any questions for Danielle in regards to this? We got a quiet group today. All right. Well, what else do you have for us, Danielle?
I'll just show quickly a chart about bills that passed last session and the trends that we're seeing. Just a little piece of information. I know my members always like to see this because they're like, wow, look what happened in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So we, as state lobbyists working on issues on your behalf and on our members' behalf, these are the type of statistics that we like to track. If you see 2017, 2018, and 2019, the huge uptick there, the difference, and our friends who work for local government probably already know this, but the difference is there was a change in rules by the Speaker of the House, where he required every single legislative budget item to be filed as a separate bill. So previous to that, if you look at 2016, there were 1,814 bills filed total during session. But that did not include state legislative budget line items. In 2017, it did. So you see the uptick there. And last session, the most bills ever in the history of the state of Florida were filed. That's 33,492. But the lowest in a long time actually were signed into law or passed, and that's 197. That includes the state budget, which is its own piece of legislation. And then there is an implementing bill that tracks with it. So the overall takeaway here is just to kind of show this is now the uptick in work and kind of the initiatives that the current speaker and president have been going through. The past 3 years, we have a new speaker and president this session, and they will be speaker and president for 2021 and 2022. That's Chris Sprouse from the Pinellas County area and Wilton Simpson from Pasco County. We have a changeover happening in the Senate. Of course, we have Senate District 9 there in your area with former Representative Jason Broder running for SD 9. We as the Realtors, we've endorsed him and are supporting him. You may even receive some mail pieces from us in support of Jason. So a lot of interesting things happening in the House and Senate in Tallahassee, and it's going to be a wild ride, but we're looking forward to it, and just looking forward to getting past Election Day on November 3rd and then starting org session on November 17th. And that's my last item, Dan.
All right, well, very good. All right, well, any questions for Danielle before she moves on?
I just had a quick question. Obviously, we're in 2020 right now, so the data is not available. But do you expect with the pandemic that the number of bills being filed and passed are going to drop off or stay consistent, or what's your expectation for that?
Yeah, my expectation is that the number of bills that are filed will decrease. Now it depends upon the line item appropriation projects, as I just mentioned. If there's a road reconstruction line item for Seminole County that's separate and apart from another piece of legislation, it would have its own bill number, which is a little bit different, again, like I said, prior to 2017. But I do believe, because of the restrictions with the state budget, with the fiscal revenue shortfalls that we have on both corporate income tax, sales tax, certainly, that there will be less of an appetite to file a lot of pieces of legislation that are separate and apart from the core functions of the state budget. And that does impact this overall number. There also will be hyper-focused on, again, very priority issues from the speaker and the president. And so I do anticipate that this number will not be 3,492. I can't predict what that will be, but definitely less.
All right, any additional questions for Danielle? All right, well, Danielle, I really appreciate you coming on board with us here today. I found it very interesting. I'm sure the group did it as well. Very enlightening, and so thank you very much for your time and for joining us this morning.